lot has happened in the 2A community since the last time I've put out the news, so let's go over the news real quick. First one we're going to touch on is frames and receivers. So if you're not familiar with it, the ATF decided that yes, this is not a frame or receiver. It is not even a firearms part. However, put it over here next to these tools that are also not firearms parts, not related to firearms, it will be considered a firearm.
Got him!
Which has a whole mess of legal problems behind that, because now you're saying that the intent to make a part makes it a part. So does that make the ore you're pulling out of the ground, because it's ultimately intended to be a firearm, does that make it a firearm? Do we have to regulate the mines? Like, there's just so many unanswered questions. Now, I understand there was another lawsuit and it failed because they didn't understand what the ATF was saying. They were saying that any unfinished frame or receiver falls into this, but no, it's got to be comboed up with tools. But where it really hides, I'm a human. I see things in black or white, legal or not legal. There's no in between, no special qualifiers. It either is or is not illegal, which is probably the reason why I would never be an attorney, because I just can't see things through that lens. So the point is, at what point does it cross that line? At what point does it move from white to black? How is it sitting in a gray area? Anyway, back to the whole point of the video. So anyway, FPC had sued. In their case, they were comboed up with a company. They got an injunctive relief, which is really hard to do. To get an injunctive relief, you have to prove to the judge that you are going to win this case. Now, the judge limited the injunctive relief to a specific company, which I don't fully understand why. I mean, if they're going to win the case anyway, why not make it countrywide? But he didn't, so, you know, we'll take what we can get. Anywho, in his reasons of explaining it, he even just flat out says, you're going to win this case. What they're doing, Congress did not award them the power. They do not use the language. When they've used the language in other parts of the GCA, so it's not like they weren't aware of the language. They chose not to use the language in here. How exactly are you going to try to regulate something where you specifically did not get the power to regulate? Number one, the Second Amendment by its... Now, this is me. Number one, the Second Amendment by itself says you can't even regulate real firearms. Like, it's specifically prohibited in the Second Amendment. Let's not even talk about chunks of metal that are not a firearm. How are you going to regulate that? And that's what it all comes down to. They don't have the authority to be able to regulate anything except for specifically what Congress awarded them the authority. Now, there's also the question, do they even have the power to regulate anything under the Second Amendment? The answer is no. It will eventually be sorted out in the Supreme Court. It hasn't been yet. So right now, we're working with what we got, and they can only regulate specifically what Congress tells them they have the power to regulate. Nowhere in there does it say they can regulate partially finished frames or receivers. So that was really cool that the judge did that. I'm pretty happy about that. Go FPC. So now when I say go FPC, I'm talking specifically about this case, because they did a tweet about a specific social issue that everybody over the age of like 13 knows you can't address. No matter what, you will fail. It falls in the same category as complimenting a girl on her boobs. Yes, it was good intention. Yes, it was meant to be a compliment. It will never be seen that way. I've tried. And I've tried more than one time. It will always be seen as some sort of insult or degrading them. You mean it as a compliment. You truly do. It comes from the bottom of your heart. You really just want to express to her, like, your boobs look really nice. No, they will never take it that way. Well, the particular tweet I'm talking about, the FPC touched on a particular social issue that falls into the same category. So there was some fallout. It was mostly just picking on them and trolling them. I don't think anybody truly meant it in the negative way, because inside of context, what they said is correct, but because they touched on that issue, and if you touch on that issue, it doesn't matter. You cannot touch on that issue and come out looking good. It's a failure. It's like stepping on a landmine and expecting it not to explode. It will blow up. I can assure you of this. So, moving on. Next one, New York CCW. Some really crazy stuff has happened there. So, they got sued, obviously, and in their lawsuit against New York for their new CCW laws, which flies in the face of Bruin, like Bruin said, you can't do this, and they're doing it anyway. Well, obviously they got sued. That particular judge said, yes, I acknowledge what they're doing, number one, flies in the face of Bruin. So I should shut this down. I should also shut this down because, according to the Second Amendment, they can't do this. However, I'm going to let them do it anyway because you didn't admit to the fact that you're going to break the law should I not rule in your favor. Which, I don't understand that. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. And if you take legal advice from me, you're stealing. But I mean, maybe some lawyer can explain. Is there a case law behind this? Is this the norm? Because the whole point of Bruin was to get rid of the two-step process. The only thing you can look at, is it or is it not constitutional? You cannot weigh in other factors. This particular judge did bring in another factor. The fact that you're not admitting to breaking the law if this doesn't go through. So he actually dismissed the case. He's flat out went and said, yes, this is unconstitutional. Yes, in the light of Bruin, this is not okay. But it's going to stand anyway. That was supposed to be done after the Bruin decision. The judges are supposed to rule on specifically, is it or is it not constitutional? No exceptions. So, that was kind of crazy. And then it even gets crazier. How, you may ask? Hey, Mr. CRS, how can it possibly get more crazier than a judge being like, okay, you're right, this is unconstitutional, however, because, yeah, I know the two-step process went down, you can't use public interest, you can only use history, but, you know, what's going on here? Wait, it definitely gets crazier. So then, the document that goes out to the police gets leaked. If you'll notice on this document, if you just kindly scroll down to bullet point number 3, which is specifically telling cops, when guns are involved, due process is not necessary. What? If you don't live in this country, let me explain something real quick. So there's something called due process. What that basically is to prevent, you know, like political enemies, people that don't deserve it. Because, I mean, you can show me any man, and I can come up with a crime he's breaking. That's the way it is. You can find a crime. So the point of due process is to make sure people don't get locked up, and the law is used maliciously to take out political rivals, stuff like that. So what they have to do is know for a fact he has actually broken the law before they charge him with a crime. That's the way this country works. Now, I know there's plenty of arguments out there, and plenty of cases where due process wasn't really applied, where they'll go and arrest somebody, and the process of making it to the first court case in itself is a punishment and insanely expensive. Yeah, I get that. But the fact of the matter is, due process still applies. It does still help people out. They're like, no, forget about due process. If there's a gun involved, assume he is guilty until proven otherwise. That's what due process prevents, because otherwise you could just look at somebody you don't like and be like, they're guilty, let's go in there and try to figure out how. And that's not okay. Because if the government actively is hunting for people to be in violation of some sort of crime, they will find some on every American, every single one. There's no exceptions. Because over the hundreds and hundreds of years this country has been around, there are a bunch of little laws on the book most people don't even know about. So, generally, they're given a pass on it. But if due process didn't exist and you wanted somebody locked up, you could lock them up and start digging through their life and try to find one of these minor infractions, hit them with the book, and keep them in prison for a period of time. That's the whole point of due process. To put a stop on that, to make sure we don't become some sort of socialist or a communist state. Because that's one of the big dividers between them and us. So that came out, and that was pretty insane. Like, I mean, I knew they were ballsy, but that takes it to another level. Like, just right in a public forum, forget about due process. That's pretty crazy. So obviously they're going to get sued over that, and hopefully we'll get some positive results here. Again, like, these things look bad on their face. They really do. But when you look at it as a larger picture, they're just another domino, and the line of dominoes waiting to be toppled over. The ATF is extended so far right now, and their nice, big, fat, juicy neck is just hanging out because of all this ridiculous stuff they're doing that they can't do. One, because of the Second Amendment. Two, Congress never awarded them that power. They're going to start getting bites taken out. And it might go to the point to where the ATF's head just falls off and they no longer exist. I truly believe, because of everything that's going on, and I believe this in my heart, I'm not just saying it to like pump views or because I'm personally invested in this, that the next time one of these types of cases make it up to a Supreme Court justice, because there's a 1,000-pound elephant in the room and it's getting to the point where it can't be ignored right now, it needs to be scaled down or just dissolved altogether. Something needs to happen to get it back under control, because it's overly clear it's running wild. It's been running wild for a while, and it's been ignored, but I think it's literally to the point where it can't be ignored anymore. So hopefully, yeah, these look bad on the face, they will net us a good result. The next one is the AWB. So in California, they have, if you're not from there, really ridiculous laws. They make no sense. Like, if you actually tried applying them, you'd be like, what? They don't go this far, but just so you understand, pretend this is on there because the rest are just as bad. You can't own a rifle that's the color blue because it's more dangerous. So you're scratching your head like trying to understand the logic behind it, and there isn't any. I've tried. There's no logic behind any of it. None of it makes any sense. Anyway, so in light of Bruin, the AWB is getting shut down. They're being sued while the state's trying to stall and make it take longer, just so they can hang on to it for a little bit longer in hopes that maybe some other Supreme Court decision will come through the pipe that will allow them to hang on to their ridiculous gun laws. Will it happen? You know, I can't see the future. Crystal ball's broken. I'm sorry. I think it'll happen. Again, I can't see the future. But anyway, they're trying to stall long enough so the possibility of a Supreme Court decision coming down that gives them some sort of foothold or some sort of grasp on gun laws happens. It increases over time. The longer they can stall, the longer that'll happen. Well, anyway, the judge in that particular case, because they wanted to stall like practically another year before like the case even starts moving, was like, nope. Here's a timeline. You need to meet it. So that's awesome. We are seeing justices applying Bruin properly. And I hope this spreads across the board and all judges start applying Bruin properly. Will they? Again, my crystal ball is broken. Will another Supreme Court decision come down that makes it so they can hang on to gun laws in light of Bruin? I don't know, my crystal ball is broken, but I'm not thinking so. So the next one is pistol braces. A little backstory on this. So the ATF, there is something you can put on a pistol that helps you hang on to the firearm. The ATF said it was legal, then they said it was illegal should you touch it on your shoulder, and then they said it was legal because holding a firearm differently doesn't change what the actual part does. Then they said it was illegal, then they said it was legal because they don't have the power to regulate an accessory. It's been back and forth. It's been back and forth since just about as long as I can remember. It was like the early 2000s when the pistol brace came out. Anyway, it just threw a wrench right in the whole gums of SBRs, because now what separates an SBR from a normal rifle or a pistol no longer has a dividing line. It's no longer black and white. The whole thing's just gray. And nobody understands it. So anyway, the ATF finally was like, you know what? This is what we'll do. We can't tell you that we're going to charge you a tax for the SBR because you can't tax a right. And you didn't buy it as an SBR, so it kind of puts us in a pickle. Now, if you take the pistol and you put this pistol brace on there, well, it's still a pistol, but it's a pistol with a brace, so it's not an SBR. What do? So they come up with this checklist. This checklist is something you go through and you can acquire points on there. And if you acquire so many points, then it's an SBR. Then you need to put a tax stamp on it. The whole point of it was to confuse everything, and there is no pistol I know of that can pass that checklist should you attach a brace. So they basically just by this checklist essentially made every pistol brace an SBR conversion device. Well, anyways, that's been cold. We haven't heard anything about that. Nobody knows what's going on around that. And then a leaked document came out talking about them setting up an amnesty period, which basically means they're going to be pushing forward with it. Again, I know that sounds bad on its face, and you're like, oh, that's terrible. But look at all the dominoes. When these start to fall, I think it's going to be a wave and just brrr, and they will likely take down the NFA or the GCA. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I don't think so. Anywho, if you'd like to help support the channel, got my Patreon right there. Also have affiliate links right there in the description. Just by clicking on those links. Even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for. Just clicking on it. That's all you got to do is just click on it. Do the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway. I'll kick back for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.